This is not another econ podcast. I'm Kaneshiro. Ready, set, pivot. Just like Ross famously shouted in the TV show Friends while trying to move a couch through a tight spot, businesses often need to change direction suddenly. In today's fast-paced business world, change is not just common, it's necessary. Think about the world of online selling, especially on platforms like Amazon. Many entrepreneurs start with a strategy called retail arbitrage, which means you're buying products from one place at a low price and selling them for more on Amazon. But as things get more and more competitive and the market shifts, the strategy can lose its edge. That's where shifting to a wholesale strategy comes in. Going from retail arbitrage to wholesale means buying products in larger quantities directly from manufacturers or authorized distributors. It's a different game with different rules. You need to find good suppliers, negotiate deals, and build a solid supply chain. So just like Ross and his friends needed a smart plan to move the couch successfully, businesses pivoting to a wholesale strategy on Amazon must plan carefully. This planning is like a roadmap that guides you through the process of change, making sure that in every step, it's well thought out. In today's episode, we have Michael Tona, an avid entrepreneur and e-commerce enthusiast with a passion for finding profitable opportunities in the wholesale and arbitrage spaces. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Ian. Pleasure having me here. I'm really excited for this podcast. And yeah, let's get started.
Yeah. So, Michael, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So I am now at a 7-figure status for Amazon selling. I actually started out as a nursing school student. Over the past few years, I've been in school, but I was doing Amazon selling simultaneously and decided to actually drop out and pursue Amazon because I saw the lucrative business model and it was scaling rather quickly for me. And I've been doing it about a little over a year, and I'm sitting at a little above a 7-figure sales revenue status. And I started with retail arbitrage, went into online arbitrage, and now I'm doing wholesale for about 9-10 months right now.
Right on. And so when it comes down to, making that change in between arbitrage and wholesale, can you explain a little bit more like what flipped the switch? Why did you make that change?
So I've realized that sourcing was getting just tougher and tougher for me. Like finding leads every day wasn't that hard, but it was consistently, you had to source 5, 6, 7 hours a day to keep finding leads. And some of these leads get burnt out. Some of these leads, our price erosion happens where buyers come in, they have to liquidate fast because they don't, manage their spend well. And all of a sudden, the price you thought was a 30 or 40% ROI is now 5% ROI. And you kind of just got to dump the product and get rid of it and find new leads. Whereas the wholesale model is a little different. Once you have a few good suppliers and you work with someone who has good communication from your suppliers, whether it's a sales rep or a manager from the team, you kind of build this trust with them, especially once you start spending a lot with the supplier. And I've noticed that replenishing is 10 times easier with wholesale. Generally, they can get the same products over and over and over. And if you could find a supplier that's like that, you don't have to go sourcing leads 40, 50 hours a week. You can kind of find a few good suppliers, and then for the next, few months, buying is a lot easier. And I just like that business model a little bit more compared to retail arbitrage and online arbitrage. So retail arbitrage is fun too, but it's kind of hard to scale. You can scale it with the right systems and, employees set up. But I hate driving everywhere. So it was never a business model for me. Wholesale is where it's at.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that kind of piqued my interest was a time aspect that you were speaking about. How much time do you think you would say you were spending sourcing, on the arbitrage side?
So like I said before, I was doing it simultaneously with nursing school, but when I had those winter breaks or those summer breaks, I kind of went in a lot heavier on sourcing. I'd probably say that I was doing the average, 40 hours a week, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less. It really depends on the week, because with arbitrage, some weekends like Labor Day weekend, which just passed, is super heavy on sourcing because of all the sales. Whereas, there might be dry periods during the week where there's not really a lot of great sales going on. So you kind of just got to keep sourcing and looking everywhere. And you might not spend as much as you would on a Labor Day weekend sale, where usually those sales get extended, into Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for the whole following week. So it's just, yeah, I'd say the time sourcing with online arbitrage is just a lot heavier compared to wholesale once you have wholesale system in place.
Right. And so now with your wholesale system in place, you went from, 40 hours a week. What is that? 120 hours a month. How much time would you say you spent sourcing with wholesale?
So like I keep saying, once you have 2 to 3 good suppliers in place, that sourcing goes a little bit down less and less depending on your setup. So like right now, and this is a big issue I see across Amazon sellers, is capital is their biggest problem. They don't have enough money to spend. They don't have enough. Everybody wants to scale because they look at someone online and they're like, oh, I want to be like them, which ultimately actually hurts most sellers because they rush things and, they get late on credit card payments or they buy a product that gets restricted. And I'm pretty transparent online. I think people should really take their time and not compare themselves against, a 7 or 8 figure seller when they're first starting out. So going back on your question, now my sourcing time is a lot less due to me not having enough money to spend on products. Now, if I had a very large, bankroll and I had a lot of capital to play with, I would obviously source a lot more throughout my week. But since I'm, sourcing with my 2-3 good suppliers, they have the same products I'm ordering over and over again. I'm scaling consistently and I'm doing it at a reasonable pace, but I don't need to use, the other 20 hours of my week to source because I don't have the money to put it down right now.
Okay. And what do you do with that extra time?
So I actually do a lot of self-prep, which people call me crazy for, but I'm in New Jersey, so tax-free everything for online arbitrage, except for, accessories, just more the necessities like groceries, shoes, clothing, we're tax-free on. So in my dead time with wholesale, if I'm not, sourcing, I will actually switch back and pivot back to online arbitrage and make use of my time. Sometimes I'll do some retail arbitrage if I'm really bored, or if I see a Nike outlet sale going on, I'll do that. But I'd say I'm doing around 15 to 20 hours for wholesale sourcing. And then I use a lot of my dead time online arbitrage sourcing and prepping my own products for online arbitrage.
Okay.
And sometimes wholesale. Yeah.
And sometimes wholesale. And so when it comes to one of the things that you kept on saying over and over is like finding a good supplier. Can you break that down a little bit and talk to us about like what's a good supplier and what's a bad supplier?
Yeah. So vetting a supplier in the wholesale space is super, super important. I think a lot of people jump to, these amazing deals that land in their lap. And usually what I like saying is if it's too good to be true, it's probably a scam or it's probably inauthentic products people are trying to just get rid of. And for those that don't know, there's a big California FBI raid with stolen products in the e-commerce space. And a lot of people got in trouble from it. And it came down to a lot of kitchen appliances. People were getting it super, super cheap. And usually that's a huge red flag. So that's the big red flag with vetting out a supplier. If it's the price is too good to be true, if you're making 100, 200% ROI, I would just stay away and, not check them out. Unless you have a credible source that says I've been buying from them for 2 years, they're fine. It's just a rare item that people get. Or maybe that person has been a consistent buyer and they get the good products first time and they're kind of letting you in on it, then I'd say that's okay. But other red flags, I don't like suppliers that have catalogs publicly available on their website, generally because there's no barrier to entry. Everybody could just download it right from the website and then everybody sees their products. So if it's profitable there, then everyone has access to it. And then 20, 30 sellers can all be selling the same thing, which leads to obviously price erosion or what other people call it price tanking, which generally is just not good. So in good suppliers, I like barriers to entry. I like when they request, LLCI N tax cert, obviously is most needed for wholesale. Most of them are going to ask you for that. And most people that are switching to wholesale have to get that set up. So that's a barrier to entry. Another barrier to entry when working with wholesale suppliers is a minimum order quantity, or an MOQ. So if I see that the MOQ is like $5,000, that weeds out so many people, because a lot of people pivoting might not have that kind of liquidity to work with. So that is usually a good sign that they're working with better buyers. I wouldn't say it's like a necessary requirement, but I like working with suppliers with higher spend limits, because it kind of weeds out a lot of the people pivoting with the smaller bankroll.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense when it comes down to, looking at suppliers. It sounds to me like you have guidelines and they're not necessarily hard and fast rules, but you get a bit of a feeling after doing it for a bit.
Yeah, it really just depends on the supplier. And going back on your previous question, I kind of forgot to mention this, but another good sign of suppliers is like if they're local to you, go to their place, speak to a sales rep. Going in person is not bad. I've done it twice already, and I'm actually texting one of the managers back and forth. And we built this really good relationship over the past 9 months, and I feel like I get firsthand on a lot of the products, and they're really good deals. And if I'm spending, he's happy. And I mean, we're all a middleman in this business, so everyone's happy if we're all doing our job. I'm not asking for these crazy discounts or anything. He's not, being like sketchy or anything with me. So it's just a good relationship, and that's a big thing. And another thing, I like looking at like reviews online. I like looking at their website. I like using, Trustpilot, other types of websites like that to just make sure that they're a credible source to buy from.
Got it. Yeah, I think that there's probably a lot to consider. And like one of the things that I thought was interesting that you mentioned, that it's not just that you need to vet the suppliers are vetting you as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
you mentioned the LLCI N and the tax certifications. Can you unpack that a little bit? What are some of these things that these vendors might be looking for?
Yeah, so I'd say 99% of the time they're going to ask you for your LLCI N, which is your employee identification number. Your LLC is your limited liability code, which is needed. It's just your business structure information. So what I like telling my people in my Discord communities is speak to a local CPA about this topic. You can go on websites like InkFile or LegalZoom, which will do it for you. But generally, those websites might charge a little bit more than the average, CPA in your local area. So if you have a friend or if you have a family member that's a CPA, ask them what they charge for LLC formation with an EIN, because all they really have to do is kind of go on one website, create it for you, and then pay state filing fees, which usually aren't that expensive. But if you go to, an attorney, or if you go on a website, they might charge you $500 to $1,500. Whereas in reality, it probably costs $300 or $400. So those are needed for wholesale. And then lastly, the tax exemption certificate, or I think other states call it resale certificates, basically just exempts you from tax. So you just need to get a tax exemption certificate online using your LLC and EIN number. You can also ask your CPA or those websites to do it for you.
And is this is like step one of my pivot?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say step one. I'd say step one is just doing the research and understanding the business model. You can go through, Seller University on Seller Central. That teaches you all what you need to know about Amazon's platform and stuff like that. That's probably the first step. Second step is just understanding the business model. Also going through podcasts like this, going through other YouTube videos on Amazon Wholesale, and what you need to know prior to getting started is a very important step. And then thirdly would probably be getting your LLC EIN tax cert, because those are needed when working with wholesalers.
Okay. So now let's kind of go through a timeline a little bit. I've done a bit of research. I understand that I want to make the jump. I start the admin side of the taxer and the LLC EIN. Where do I go from here? I got to start to, find suppliers and find, a category or a niche that I'm going to tackle. Are there Is there a category or niche that's more lucrative than others?
Um, so I wouldn't say, I guess more lucrative could be a good way to describe it. I think all categories are great. It really comes down to the price you're getting it at. Like electronics are great if you're getting really high margins, but if you get a used product back, generally it hurts you a lot more than a grocery used item because the average sale price and the average buy cost are a grocery item could be $10, whereas an electronic could be like $1,000. So it really just depends on your margins and your return rates, and that comes with experience. So what I like telling people that are starting out are start with the products and categories that generally cost a little bit less, like grocery, beauty, health and household. What else is there? Pet supplies, lawn and garden. Those are all generally a little bit lower. I wouldn't mess with any of the appliances first, electronics or like tools and stuff like that. Because like I said, if you get some returns or if you list the product on the wrong ASINs, you get a lot of issues and you get a lot of fees. And if it's a damaged or used item or just completely wrong item, you're out a large sum of money.
Yeah.
So I like definitely working with lower return rate categories. So grocery is super low because I don't think Amazon even allows returns with grocery anymore, with certain ones at least. And then beauty's pretty low. Health and household's really low. Pet supplies are pretty low. Things that people want that generally they know they want are going to be a low return rate.
Interesting. So like stay away from, apparel where people are buying the wrong size. It's not the right thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say stay away, but yeah, as a beginner, stay away. As a beginner, stay away. But like if you're working like with, let's say, a private brand future, like down the road, I wouldn't say stay away because their pricing might work for you to, let's say you get 1,000 sales and 10 of them are used or wrong items. You can liquidate those and take the loss and you'll probably still have good enough margins to, profit. But I think people that are in the beginning stages get overwhelmed or discouraged when that kind of stuff happens. And it happens a lot in online arbitrage and people stay away from it. But I'm really heavy into shoes and apparel, but that's just because my margins make up for the damaged products, the return products that are wrong. So it really just depends on the seller themselves. And if they can really understand that that's going to happen, then it's okay. But if they want to start with maybe a more lower risk category, I would start with the other ones that I mentioned.
So taking that into account, we're talking about not necessarily big ticket items, and then items with historically low return rates is kind of a good 1-2 punch to consider when thinking about what I'm getting into. Yeah, it's funny you say that because I remember that, and you probably remember this more than I do. I remember there was this whole thing where people were getting into like above ground pools in the summer, and that hype went on for a while, and then like that same year, I think people were selling like what was it? They were like space heaters from Home Depot.
Mm-hmm.
And so
the COVID boom.
Yeah.
So it's funny you mentioned that because that's right when I started Amazon, because I saw a bunch of people posting about it because I came from the reselling space. So I did a lot of shoe botting. I did a lot of sneaker reselling when I was in school, and I was trying to do, nursing school and physical therapy school. So in my dead time, I was, getting shoes on sneakers apps. I was, botting shoes on sneaker drops. But then I saw that and I'm like, where are people selling this, or how are they selling it? Besides eBay, because eBay's good because they have local pickup. But then I started seeing a lot of Amazon posts, and that's what kind of piqued my interest and got me started. On top of all the countless tweets I saw across my timeline with Amazon FBA, but I saw people doing pools and heaters, and I was like, all right, let me try some pools. I did it on Facebook Marketplace. It was so-so. I think I was a little late to it, but a lot of people ran into the issue of not calculating their shipping costs.
Yeah.
Right. And they were shipping these massive space heaters. Everybody knows what the space heaters were for. Like the COVID boom, all the restaurants were outside, had these massive space heaters. But all these resellers basically bought them all up before they could and were selling it on Amazon. But the shipping costs were so high, a lot of people weren't factoring it into their margin. And I did hear a lot of issues with that. Whereas the pools was a little different. Pools were actually really, really good. I think people just needed to do LTL shipping, and a lot of people were doing SPD shipping, and that's what really hurt them. Because if you send it on a pallet, it's 10 times cheaper. And that's what goes back. It's always kind of goes back to wholesale kind of methods that it's more worth it to pallet ship, because if it's a heavy item, it's going to be very, very expensive if you're shipping like UPS.
Yeah, because that's the thing about like the wholesale thing. I know that the pools and the space heaters were a lot of, were a lot of arbitrageurs where dudes were getting, 100 space heaters dropped off on their front lawn, and it was like awesome, but like crazy at the same time.
Yeah.
But like once you get into the wholesale space, you often have similar problems, right? Typically when you could do stuff out of maybe your garage or your living room, now you're having larger quantities of product. And so how do you start to make the decisions about what to do with it? Where do I store? Where do I prep? Like, what do you tell people?
Yeah. So I definitely am very transparent when we're like pivoting from OA to wholesale. And number one is space. If you want to do it from your house, just keep in mind, like if you're ordering pallets to your house, you need to have space for it. And for someone like me who lives in a residential address with a 1-car garage, I could fit 3 pallets in my garage. So getting them in and out is not easy. And the process of Amazon shipping it is not easy. So you do need to understand that. And you do need to, have systems in place that can prep it fast, whether it's family, neighbors, or workers that you want to hire. You need to get it in and out quick. And that's really, really big with wholesale, because it's all about turnover and sell-through rates. Faster it's in, the faster it's out. I think that's the biggest thing. And if you're in a city, it's going to be a little bit harder. You're going to have to work with prep centers. You're going to have a local warehouse. And most beginners are not doing that. They're probably maybe getting, like a U-Haul storage space. They could do that. I don't usually recommend that for beginners. I'd probably say work with the prep center generally, because you can probably get 75 cents a unit for wholesale if you're pumping out a lot of units. But there's a lot of things that one should know when pivoting from OA to wholesale. But definitely, if you're doing it from a residential address, start small. Don't order too much on the first orders. Go wider on your ASINs. Don't go super deep.
And know how many pallets fit in your garage.
Yes. So three could fit in a normal garage. So just take that and run with it. If you have a 2-car garage, then I'm jealous of you. But and it's tough with and going back on what I said about residential spaces. Amazon picking up pallets from residential, they do not like it. So if you request a pallet pickup from Amazon Partnered, which for people that don't know about it, Amazon Partnered basically means Amazon will pick up the pallets. You could do a non-partnered carrier, which means just another trucking company that you get a quote from. Generally, that will be more expensive, but the process is 10 times easier. So people will generally like doing non-partnered carriers, and it might be $100 or $200 more, but they'll pick it up quicker. They'll have, pallet jacks. They'll have a lift gate. Most of the time you can request it, call them up that day and be like, hey, make sure you send this. Whereas contacting Amazon, it's impossible. And everybody understands that. So yeah, it's a little more expensive with a non-partner carrier, but you can get your pallets picked up quicker. That means it gets checked in quicker. Your money's back in your account quicker. So the sell-through rate kind of makes up for that, higher cost. Whereas Amazon Partnered, if you're picking it up, or if Amazon's picking it up, it's a lot cheaper. So a lot of people go with the cheaper route. Even I do it with the cheaper route sometimes. But sometimes they'll send a freight truck. And I'm like, hey, I'm in a residential address. Like, I made a case online. I said, don't bring a freight truck. Bring a smaller truck and make sure there's a pallet jack. And sometimes they don't see it. And it takes 2 weeks to get it picked up. But within those 2 weeks, my items could have been there on the first day from a non-partnered. So sometimes paying the extra cost is worth it.
Yeah, most definitely. It's one of those things, and I think about it in like my day-to-day life is sometimes sometimes you're like, I can get this product or service for a cheaper price. But then at the tail end, you're paying more. It's kind of like an airline fare. You're like, oh, I got a great rate, but then they're like, now you need to add a bag, you need to buy a seat, you need to do this. And then in the long run, you're like, I should have just gone with one of the big guys and I would have got everything under one, in one package, and my life would have been easier. And the difference in that cost would have been it would have been negligible at that point, and I wouldn't have had that money. So I guess there's a lot of things to think about.
And this is why people buy from Amazon. It's convenience. I'd rather work with a non-partnered carrier because I don't have the headache of dealing with Amazon support. And like the first time I did a pallet with Amazon partnered, they were supposed to pick it up, let's say on like day one, like hypothetically day one. Then they sent me an email. They're like, oh, by the way, we're not coming for another 4 days. And I'm like, okay, whatever. My pallet's sitting outside underneath a tarp because I was away that weekend. So I'm like, I don't know what to do. I can't move this whole pallet in. So my parents actually watched it for me. And they're like, all right, what day are they coming? And it was like, the email said Saturday. I'm like, okay. They didn't end up coming until like the next Friday.
Wow.
So it's like, yeah, it took like, the first pickup took like 2 weeks to get picked up. And it's like I said before, if you get a non-partner carrier and you say, hey, come tomorrow, and they give you a quote and you say, I need a pallet jack and a lift gate to get it out because I'm in a residential address, I need a smaller box truck, they'll do that. And it might be $200 more, but you're going to have that money back in your pocket faster. And like I said, it's the convenience. People are going to buy on Amazon rather than their Target because they're in a city or they're lazy or they don't have time because they have kids. So the convenience 10 out of 10 times is 10 times better, like 10 times better than working with Amazon sometimes.
Yeah. And probably cheaper than your parents' hourly rate at that point for a whole week.
Yeah, pretty much. My mom's basically on payroll at this point.
So Michael, as we kind of move to the end of this episode, do you have any final thoughts?
I think, for the viewers, is that what you mean? Kind of?
Yeah. Yeah.
So pivot slowly, and going back on the pivot, just like the Friends theme, definitely take your time and think about it. You got to do it slowly. You can't rush it. If you rush it, you're going to have mistakes. And it can really hurt your business. I've seen a lot of people on social media go super deep on products and then it gets, restricted and then they're out 20, 30 grand. So going wider on your ASINs and not as deep on ASINs is generally a big tip for people like venturing into a market like wholesale, not market, but a business model like wholesale. So you got to be careful. And especially with people that are like maybe only been doing OA for a few months or arbitrage for a few months. I was doing it for a good 6 months and I understood the business model. I had friends in the space. So I had people telling me a lot of knowledgeable things. But if maybe you're someone who's a little bit more laid back, not on social media, take your time.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with taking your time. Stop comparing yourself to the 7-8 figure sellers because you don't even know what their margins are. And social media is full of a lot of lies too. So don't compare yourself online. I think that's the biggest thing. Take your time with scaling.
Agreed.
There's no rush to it.
Agreed. And I think that the planning part is a key part to what you're talking about. I had a professor once tell me that, what did he say? He said that plans never work, but planning does. And, just about kind of having that roadmap will help guide you to where you need to be, even if you have to take a detour and pivot every once in a while.
Yep. And network. Yeah. There's so many people I talk to on a daily basis that I probably thank them every month because I would not be here today if it wasn't for them answering my 10, 20 questions when I was a beginner.
Yeah. So yeah, Michael Tona of Tona FBA, ladies and gentlemen, 7-figure Amazon wholesale and online arbitrage expert, and he's an Amazon FBA mentor. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you for having me. It was awesome.